Hello, friends. Welcome back to the While We're Waiting Hope After Child Loss podcast. I'm Jill Sullivan, your host and one of the co-founders of the While We're Waiting ministry. This is a podcast of stories of devastating loss and grief and heartbreak and struggle, and stories of hope and healing and faith and, yes, even joy. Underlying every conversation is the hope we have in Jesus Christ, which makes it possible to not just survive the loss of a child, but to live well while we're waiting to see them again in heaven one day. You can learn more about our ministry and the free bereaved parent retreats we host by visiting our website at www.whilewe'rewaiting.org. Welcome to episode number 249. Before we get into our conversation, just a quick reminder about the Our Hearts Are Home conference for bereaved parents. It's scheduled for April 25th and 26th in Lynchburg, Virginia, and it will be a great opportunity to find community with other bereaved parents and to hear some amazing speakers. You can join in person or online, and you can register on their website at ourheartsarehome.org, and that link will be in the show notes. The cost is very affordable, and if finances are tight right now, there are scholarships available. Brad and I would love to see you there. I was honored to sit down with Brian and Danna Mayhall recently, who joined me to share the story of their daughter Amelia, a young woman whose life was characterized by kindness and compassion. Amelia sustained a devastating injury after a woman made a deliberate choice to drive the wrong way down the freeway and crashed into her car. In today's episode, you'll hear about the months Amelia lived beyond the crash, the tender and loving care given by her parents, and her ultimate homegoing in July of 2013. You'll also hear how the Mayhalls have walked through the legal system after the driver was charged with felony homicide, including the victim's impact statement Danna gave to the judge. This is a conversation about loss, but more than that, it's a conversation about love, grace, and the presence of God in our deepest valleys. Let's listen in. Hi, Brian and Danna. Thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today.
Hi, Jill. Thank you for giving us the opportunity to share Amelia's story today.
Yes, we feel very honored to be here. Thank you.
Well, I have been looking forward to our conversation. I know our listeners will be blessed by it. So let's start by just giving you guys an opportunity to tell the listeners a little bit about yourselves. Tell us where you're from and what life is like for you there.
Okay, we live in Searcy, Arkansas. Danna grew up in Pennsylvania. I grew up in Alabama, and we met at Harding University in Searcy, and we were married before our senior year at Harding, and never intended to stick around Searcy, but kind of worked out that way. God had plans for us, evidently. And so we've been married for almost 49 years. So Searcy is pretty much home.
Yeah, now I can't believe you guys have been married for 49 years. I didn't think y'all were old enough to be married for 49 years.
Yes, I'm not. I'm really just 25 years old. But
We have two daughters. Amelia is our youngest, and Melissa is our oldest. Melissa lives in Richmond, Virginia. And then we'll share more about Amelia as we go on. We have 4 grandchildren, 2 from each. We are both retired. I was in the restaurant management business for pretty much all of my career, and we even owned a restaurant here in Searcy for about 3.5 years. Well, the girls were in high school. Danna is retired. I'll let her tell you about that.
Want to tell what you like to do now?
Oh, what I like to do now. I'm kind of a amateur photographer and a gardener. We'll talk about that a little bit later too. But those are the two things that I like to do the most. So.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm retired as a social worker, mental health therapist. And I have gotten into something that's so joyful for me. I make art out of old jewelry. So it has just been a really fun thing to do, and I'm enjoying that. And I also help him some in the garden, but I'm really more the planner, and he's the planter. I come up with the ideas, and he does the work, the hard work. So
Yeah. Well, every gardening couple needs a planner and a planter.
yes,
That's perfect.
absolutely. And we also we're loving this retirement period because we're getting to travel a good bit. We've had so many fun places we've gone to, Israel and Italy and Ireland, and we went to Greece, and we just got back actually from the Canyonlands just a week or so ago. Got to see the Grand Canyon in the snow.
Yeah, that's
Not
pretty
very many
special.
people get to see that, but yeah, we didn't get to see a lot of the canyon because of the snow, but it was amazing, amazing trip. So that's us.
And because Brian's a photographer, it's really fun to follow you on Facebook and get to see all your pictures.
Yes, he is amazing.
Yeah. So we're here today to talk about Amelia and her story. Take a few minutes and help us get to know her a little bit.
Oh, I love talking about her. Actually, her birthday was just 2 days ago. She would have been 45 years old.
Mhm.
As a child, she was just the sweetest child. And one of her friends, her mother, actually shared something with me. You know, those sweet little assignments they have in grade school where they're supposed to describe their friend and write about it. And it's probably more of a penmanship kind of assignment, but her mother saved this and shared it with me. And the thing that her sweet friend Lee said, she said the reason she loved Amelia was that she never left anyone out. And
Mm.
that was Amelia. She was very compassionate, and that was an assignment in the second grade. So for her friend to recognize that about her, and one of the quick little stories I'll share about that, they both were invited to a birthday party, probably about that age. And I didn't know the little girl that the party was for, and I didn't know the area of town that it was planned for. So I told Amelia I didn't really think she should go. And I remember her saying, "But Mom, you don't understand. Nobody else is going to be there." And
Yeah.
she and her friend were the only two little friends that were there. So that was
Mm.
Amelia's heart, even as a second grader. She was so smart. She got to go to the University of Arkansas on a full scholarship. I always say that they paid her to go to school, paid for her sorority housing, her books. It was amazing. Math came so easily to her. I don't really know where she got that from me, or it must have been from him because it's not for me. But she was just the sweetest. She was baptized by her peepaw, my dad, in Pennsylvania when she was 12 years old on a family visit back home for me. She just was an amazing gift giver. Her friends still talk about that. She had a compassion. One story, I won't go into the details, but she went grocery shopping with an elderly gentleman that she encountered at a store in Augusta, Georgia one time, and continued that relationship by taking food to he and his wife for a good time after that. Oh my, I could go on and on. She was the other thing I want to mention about her spirit. She was very forgiving. And
Mm.
I think that will come into play as we tell her story. She had a forgiving nature. Her spirit was that way. She was married at the time that she went to heaven and had two small children, Charlotte and Theo. Just, she was a blessing to everybody that knew her.
Yes. Yes. Sounds like just such a wonderful young lady, young child, and just all the way up. She just kept
Mhm.
that sweet spirit about her. I love that. Now, Amelia is a beautiful name. Is there a story behind her name?
She was actually named after my mother. My mother was Ruth Amelia. And so we
Hmm.
took the Amelia part, and it kind of worked out pretty well because my mother always wanted a dark haired, blue eyed grandchild. And of course, we didn't know when we named her that, but she's the one that turned out to be the dark haired, blue eyed grandchild, just like our grandmother wanted. And so that's how we came by the name, but it was a sweet name, and she was a sweet girl.
Yeah. She just seemed to fit her name really,
Absolutely.
really well. Yeah. So, talk about what happened in December of 2012.
One of the things I didn't mention about her personality, she tended to be a procrastinator, but early on in December of that year, she was so prepared for Christmas. All of her decorating was done. Her gifts were bought. She had even sent out Christmas cards with the family's picture and their new address because they had just moved. So that was kind of unusual because she was kind of a last minute person. But on that beautiful, sunny, crisp, cool December day, she was driving back to pick up the kiddos from a Mother's Day Out program. And a woman about her age actually made the decision to get on the expressway around Augusta, Georgia, driving the wrong way. She got on the expressway and set her cruise on 77. And there were other drivers that were able to avoid her because they could see her coming. But Amelia went around a blind curve and was not able to avoid the collision. And the accident was devastating, as you can imagine, and it caused a severe brain injury. She had a traumatic brain injury, among other things, but that was the injury that was so devastating to her. She stayed in the hospital in the trauma unit for a long time in Augusta, and she was able to go. We were able to take her to a rehab center in Atlanta, Georgia. Shepherd Center is a renowned center that started mainly as a spinal cord injury. They also had a brain injury program. So she was able to go there for
8 weeks.
8 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And during that time, we got a few hopeful signs, and they did so many things. They did innovative things. They tried medicine that was typically not known for waking someone up. She was given Ambien, which is a sleep aid, but they gave that to her to hopefully wake her up. They did a baclofen pump in her stomach to keep the rigidity in her muscles calm down. They tried so many things. And we had a couple of hopeful moments. She never really responded to us after the accident. Never was able to really move independently or do anything for herself. But God gave us both a moment that I know was from God, because there's no other way to describe it. She had difficult days. And when I stayed with her the whole time, from the moment of the accident until, well, except for a couple of days that I went home to check on my dad, who was very ill, I was with her every day. But on this particular day in Atlanta, it was just hard. And I was getting ready to go back to the apartment that was connected to Shepherd Center. And I said, "Oh, Amelia, I wish you could just say Mama." And it was very breathy, but she said, "Mama."
Wow.
And it was the sweetest gift that I'd ever had. And I will never, ever forget that. But that was really the only time that I can say she spoke to me. And then Brian has a similar story.
While she was, after about the first month, by the end of December, we decided one of us had to go back and make a living. And I knew it wasn't going to be Danna. And so my practice, once we got through Christmas and everything, was to fly from Searcy back to either Atlanta or Augusta when she was there. Every couple of weeks, I would fly out on a Wednesday and spend a couple of days there and then come back home. But one of those trips, I flew from Memphis usually. I flew from Memphis to Atlanta, got on the train, on the bus, got dropped off in front of Shepherd Center and went upstairs to the floor Amelia was on. And when the elevator door opened, there was Amelia sitting in a wheelchair at the nurse's station. And so I walked over to her and I grabbed her hand and I knelt down by her wheelchair and I said, "I love you, Amelia." And she, in that breathy, kind of barely audible voice, said, "I love you." And that was probably the only, direct response that I ever experienced during the whole time that she was in the hospital or at home after that. So, But very, very special God moments, things that we would cherish forever.
Absolutely. So. Absolutely. One other thing I was going to tell about the time at Shepherd Center, I found some of her CDs that she had burned back when that was a thing. I know nobody even knows what that is anymore. But
or Spotify and all of that. Yes.
Mm-hmm. She had these CDs that were special songs to her. So I would play them to her a lot when she was, especially in the rehab unit. And we noticed her mouthing words to a song one day. And it was, I think it's going to rain today. I think it was Bette Midler's version. But the phrase that's repeated 4 or 5 times in this song is, human kindness is overflowing. She mouthed those words. And I thought, that's Amelia. I mean, that is her whole spirit. But when you think about all of the motions that is required to mouth that phrase, so that was a very special moment too. And so we had those encouraging times, and then it got to the point where the doctors decided they could do no more there for her, and really we have really thought that her whole rehab time was more than likely a professional courtesy to her husband, because her injury was so devastating. He's a vascular surgeon in Augusta, Georgia, and we feel like they tried everything they could do. But it came to the point where we went back. I went back with her to her home in Augusta, actually North Augusta, South Carolina. It's right there on the line, the Savannah River. Beautiful neighborhood. We put her hospital bed in the children's playroom, and there were windows all surrounding this room, looking out onto this field. The deer would come up in the morning and the late afternoon. It was just a lovely place. But we took her back home, and I was able to care for her every day, to sing to her, to help heal a lot of the facial injuries and a lot of the scarring and the injuries she had on the outside anyway. I was able to pray with her. All of those days I know were God's gifts to me, to be able to do that care for her. And during that time too, the other thing God did was he sent all of these amazing people, not only in her home in Augusta, but when we were in Atlanta. We call them our forever friends. In fact, I got flowers. I get flowers on her birthday every year from these folks that we met in Atlanta that would come and sit with her, would let me go shopping.
Let you go to church.
Let me go to church on Sunday morning. They were just so dear to me, and still are very dear to me. And then a very sweet new friend in Augusta organized this group that they called Amelia's Angels. And they had it on a schedule where they asked what I needed, and they would come and let me go to Target or bring me a meal. Or I even had one very special lady who has since gone on to heaven that would come and do personal training with me. I was kind of missing my gym and being able to work out. So she would bring the exercise ball and bring some whatever she could into the playroom and do personal training. So we were blessed with, people that would just drop off a casserole or bring me something occasionally during that time, because they really hadn't been, Will and Amelia had not lived in Augusta long. So most of these people were new friends, new to Amelia and new to me, of course. But those days were special in a lot of ways. They were very, very hard because she could do nothing for herself.
Kind of a odd thing. I don't think we've ever told this at a retreat or anything, but for Danna to get her in and out of bed, she had a lift, which was kind of like you put this sling under her, you have to lift her, you have to take her to the chair. Well, Danna dropped her on the floor one day. And she was panicking because she didn't know how she was going to get her back up into the bed. But, it was very difficult. And yet it was it was a labor of love for Danna.
Mm.
She stepped up into that, and she put everything she had into it. She sang to her, she prayed, she read to her. Everything, every moment of every day was filled up with Danna loving on Amelia during that time.
Mm. Yeah. And I believe Amelia knew that, you know. I know that she felt your love. And those friends who came through and did those special things for you, those are things you never forget. Those are people that will be precious to you for the rest of your life. What a
Absolutely.
gift. Yeah.
Absolutely. Those days, like I said, were special in a lot of ways, but they were very hard. And Will could see that she was declining. And so on July the 23rd, she went to heaven. Will had made the decision. She developed pneumonia, and Will made the decision to remove support and let her go into the arms of Jesus, which
They had discussed this before.
yeah, they had.
Will and Amelia had discussed what would happen if either one of them were in this type of a situation, and what they would want.
Sure.
And I really think that Will knew very, very, very early on that this was not going to end the way we wanted it to end. And yet he did everything he could for her to give her every chance to survive. He once said, if the only thing that she can do is sit in the middle of the floor and play with her children, I'm good with that. But it came the time when when we had spent all the time that we could spend doing for her, and she continued to decline, that it was just, he said, I'm going to honor her wishes. And so when she went into the hospital for the pneumonia, we just allowed her to go and be in the arms of Jesus.
Mm. Yeah. A very difficult time, I know. And those decisions were out of your hands as her parents because she was a married adult.
Mhm.
Um, and so I'm sure that was hard in a way also. Talk about that?
Well, it was hard, especially for me, because I was well, I know it was for Brian too. I shouldn't say it that way, but I was the one doing the caregiving. So for me to stop doing something that I had done all of those months,
Here 7 months later, Danna was still feeding her twice a day
we're
through a
doing
tube,
tube feeding.
and having to suction out her trach and all of that kind of stuff. And so it was, it's really hard when you've cared for someone for that long. This was 7.5 months after the accident to just stop. Very
Yeah.
difficult.
But at the same time, I know it was a loving decision that he made.
Yes.
So we understood. But,
Mhm.
when you're the parents of an adult child, it's just such a different situation. She was still her baby, but
Of
her
course.
spouse was the one ultimately making decisions, was the one that got information first. So many things.
Later on, when we talk about the court system and all that kind of thing, he was the one, that everybody went to.
Right. So
So
that we understood it, but sometimes it was
it's very
really
difficult.
difficult to be in that second place or getting information second.
Sure. Sure. Yes. And I'm thankful that he was a loving husband and that
Mhm.
he took so much of your wishes into consideration. Um, so after Amelia went to heaven, you guys were involved in the planning of her celebration service, and you made that a really special event for her children. Talk about that.
We did. We wanted to have two separate services for her. One in Augusta, Georgia, because there were so many people that we had met that became very special, and one here in Arkansas, in her hometown. So we were able to do that. And the one thing that we wanted to do in Searcy, especially, was to have a butterfly release, because during the time that I was caring for Amelia, her the children, Charlotte and Theo, were being cared for by Will's parents, and what they would do a lot of days during those several months was they would take the kids to a butterfly sanctuary. So that became a very special place for them, and that's actually where Will took them to tell them that their mommy had died. was the butterfly sanctuary. Now, Theo was only 18 months old, so he remembers nothing. And Charlotte at 4 years of age, I'm not sure how much she remembers, but at that moment, Mommy was a very important person to her. So butterflies became important to Charlotte and to us. So we had this beautiful, Charlotte didn't attend the actual service, but just the butterfly part. And it was so beautiful. And it was a very interesting day because that morning it was storming and just really an awful morning of her service. And we kept peeking out the doors at the church to see. And toward the middle of her service, we looked out and we could see blue skies, and we knew we'd be able to do the butterflies. It's like God opened up those, it was just glorious. I mean, blue and pretty clouds. But we did that for us and for Charlotte. But one of the things, too, the special part of that is when we were describing the service to a 4-year-old, we said it was a celebration, that her friends were going to come and tell stories. And so Charlotte called it a memory party. So it's really, really hard for me to think of a funeral service as anything but a memory party. So, I think that was very, very special to us, having both of those services. That's how butterflies became so important.
Yes, and we'll talk more about butterflies in a little bit, but I love the memory party idea. I think of funerals that way too now, since I've met you guys and heard you talk about it so often. I just love that idea that a funeral should be a memory party.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I love that you have shared that with us. So now let's talk about the driver who hit Amelia's car. You mentioned that she was driving the wrong way down the freeway. What was going on there?
Well, that's one of the really difficult parts in the whole story is this lady was in the car with her husband and with her 4-year-old son. And from what her 4-year-old son said in the emergency room, Mommy and Daddy were fussing. And Mommy and Daddy never told a story. They never told us what was going on. They never told us what happened. They never told the police really what happened. The assumption was that they were angry with each other, and Mom was driving, and she decided that she was going to show him, I don't know what, but that was her decision, to get on the expressway going the wrong way and just try to freak him out or whatever. I don't know. But it ended up, that her own 4-year-old son was in the back seat when this crash happened. And even at the trial, we had never met this woman. We had never said anything to this woman. And the only time that we really got to see her was when the trial was going on. And so, and they never even put on a defense to tell anything that happened. So we know very little about her. We know very little about the circumstance that led her to do that or anything else. It's just all really speculation.
Yeah. Well, and that began your journey through the court process. Like you said, I would love for you to share a little bit about that, because I know we have listeners that may have been through a legal process after the wrongful death of their child. And they may be in the middle of it. They may be at the beginning of it. I would love to hear just a little bit about the process that you guys went through with the legal system.
Okay. Well, of course, just a few days after the incident happened, the police decided to file some charges against her for aggravated assault. Of course, all the traffic offenses that she did, but they charged her with aggravated assault for 4 different people: Amelia and another lady that was in the accident. There was actually 3 other cars involved in the accident besides Amelia. So they filed charges against her. And so that began the legal process. Then 7.5 months later, when Amelia passed away, of course, those charges were amended to felony murder. And so that process of going through all of the court system, if you've ever had anything to do with it, it's a very slow process. It's not something that happens quickly. And so, about the time you think, okay, we're getting ready to go to trial, then they'll hire a new lawyer and they have to start all over again, or, something else will happen. And so it was a process that from Amelia's death until the sentencing of this lady was 2 years to the day. She was sentenced 2 years after Amelia's heaven date. And so, there's things that happen during that time that there's victims advocates were very helpful in a lot of ways. But like I mentioned before, since she was a married adult, most of that stuff went through will. And grandparents don't get a whole lot of, our parents don't get a whole lot of input, for an adult child whenever something like that's going on. So it was difficult. And I know for us, it was something that really kind of delayed our grieving process, because, people talk about closure and this, that, and the other. I mean, I don't know how much there is to that. Closure doesn't bring anybody back, and closure doesn't make you feel a whole lot better about it. But as long as there's something hanging over your head, as far as all this legal stuff going on, it's very difficult for you to be able to focus on grieving and dealing with what has happened and what is continuing to go on.
Sure. I've heard it said that when you have a situation like you did, where there's a court process that's going on and you're still waiting for resolution, it's almost like you're still parenting your child through that process. Is that how you felt?
Mm-hmm. In a lot of ways, yes.
Yeah.
And during that court time and the trial, we found out things that we didn't even know that happened at the accident. So, and sometimes, you're not prepared. I guess we were trying to protect ourselves and insulate ourselves from some of those new gut punches, but often they would come out of nowhere. I mean, the gentleman that testified that was first on the scene and held Amelia's hand until the ambulance got there and just sobbed on the stand. We didn't know about him.
Wow.
We were grateful for him, but we didn't know until that moment. So there were a lot of things that came up that we were not prepared.
When first responders got there to the accident scene, they saw child seats in the car, and they were afraid that there were children on scene somewhere. And so they were panicking and looking for the kids. But, some of those things came out during the trial. Of course, we found out everything about all the logistics of the accident, of the incident happening and all that, how fast she was going, that she never touched her brakes at all. They can tell all of that with forensics. We found out every detail about the incident, but zero details as to why or what was going on. So that's tough.
Yeah.
To hear about all of that and hear all the gory details, and you still don't know why.
She was sentenced to life in prison, which in Georgia is 30 years without the possibility of parole.
There's that.
But
but that's not closure. That's consequences for your actions.
Exactly.
But it doesn't really settle anything for us or for her children or for her husband. And that's just the nature of it. Justice is done, but everything is not set right.
Yeah, exactly. Did you guys have the opportunity to give a victim impact statement? Was that part of the process?
Yes, it was. And we, those are typically done at sentencing. But we were not going to be able to go back for the sentencing part. That's usually a couple of weeks after the trial ends, because we were 11 hours away. So, and there was
Right.
something we couldn't go back. And so all along, I thought that I was going to give my impact statement at the end of the trial. But the interesting thing that happened was the prosecution presented their case all week, turned it over to the defense on a Friday,
Yes, it was.
after lunch on Friday. So in my mind, I didn't have to prepare this statement yet. I had kind of thought about it, but not really prepared. So the defense, instead of presenting a defense, rested. They didn't present anything. So the case went to the jury that Friday afternoon. But the lawyers were still telling us, well, we don't expect to get a verdict today. It will probably go into next week, because it was late in the afternoon. Well, they came back that Friday evening. And still in my mind, I don't know, you're just in a place where you're numb and you don't know what to do. But I really not thought about what I was going to say. But I had done, those canvas prints, the big 16 by 20. I had done 3 or 4 of those. So I wanted the jury, I wanted the judge, I wanted the woman that had done this to see Amelia. They had heard about her all week. I wanted them to see her with her children, with us.
Yes.
So I had those with me. I think I kept those with me all week. Anyway, this is late Friday evening. And the judge says, well, I understand we have our parents who want to do a victim impact statement. And Brian looked at me and I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing this. I had nothing written down. I had not prepared any words. I had my pictures and they were like, I was holding on to them dear life. Brian walked up to...
I was a basket case. There was no way I was doing a victim's impact statement. And so I was Danna's support.
But he held me up. But I truly believe God gave me those words because they weren't mine. I talked about the impact Amelia had on this world, the wonderful things she did. She gave food and water out to some of the folks in downtown Little Rock she encountered, the homeless folks. I told some of those stories and what a difference she made in this world. And I was able to say, I wasn't allowed to directly speak to the woman that caused the accident, but I spoke to the judge and to her through the judge. I said, I want her life to be better because of Amelia and what Amelia was for this world. I want her to know what good Amelia did in this world. And I pray that she's able to turn her life around somehow and make a difference in this world too. So a lot of the things I said, I don't remember them because it truly was God speaking words. But it really, I think, made a difference in a lot of ways. For one thing, I know our son-in-law was prepared when he did his impact statement to really say some horrible things to that woman. He was angry. He was worried about his kids. He'd lost the love of his life. But I remember later him telling us that his statement changed because he saw how the judge and the jury and other folks responded to what I said. So his words were different than what he had originally planned to say. That was our experience with, and I don't really know what all they expected me to say with the victim impact statement, but that's how I did it. And it was another God moment. We had so many of them.
It sounds like it was done exactly the way it was supposed to be done.
Yes.
He gave you those words right when you needed them.
Absolutely.
That's pretty special.
Yes.
Do you have any words of encouragement or advice for someone who finds themselves going through the court system right now?
One thing that I think we did not do as much and we could have was to connect with the victim advocate. They have folks like that available to you, and we knew who that was. We didn't know to do that, and I wish we had. I wish we had, been more connected.
And that varies. Some states have a really, really strong victim advocate program, and some don't. And so, really, a lot of that kind of depends on where you are and what the state has available wherever that is. But they told us what was going on, but we'd never really asked them a lot of questions. And I think that would have been a good thing for us to do. And the other advice that I would give to someone is just, to prepare yourself that this is going to be a long, arduous haul. This is not going to be something that's going to be quick and easy. No matter how clear-cut a case may be, it takes time. And particularly since we were the parents and not the spouse, we weren't in control of anything. And so it's hard to deal with. But if you understand that going in, then you don't get your hopes up for things to go quickly and easily like you would like for them to.
This concludes the first half of my conversation with Brian and Danna Mayhall. Be sure to come back next week as we discuss more about the difficult path of their legal process, their ongoing grief journey, and the way they found healing and purpose after loss. Most of all, we'll see how Amelia's life and her legacy continue to reflect the light of Christ. Thanks again for listening, and I'll look forward to sharing the rest of our chat with you next Wednesday.